forehead. Hey guys, what's happening? Today is Thursday, August 30th, and I'm here with my friend Michael Dippy with IDignity. But before I let him tell his amazing story, give us a thumbs up. Let us know you can hear us or see us. We've switched rooms. We're now in the lovely dining room at the Citrus Club. I see some people tuning in. So give me a thumbs up or at least a heart for him. He's not on Facebook Live that often, so show him that you guys have some love. Hey Norkis, hey John, hey Tracy, what's up? Oh, say we got thumbs up, so that means they can hear us. All right. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you taking time. You've got a whole village and army behind you, which I love. Because I'm learning that that's very important if you want to continue to be successful and expand your success. We can hear you. Thanks, Tracy. So tell us a little bit about you, because we're going to talk about IDignity. We're going to delve into that super deep, but it's always good to know the story and then get to the point where there's a why, because it wasn't like you were born and IDignity was your first idea at 5 years old.
No.
So give us a little bit of your background.
So,
please.
Born right here in lovely Orlando, Florida. Went to school at University of Florida.
Go Gators.
Studied architecture. Practiced in that space for a number of years. And then stumbled across unmet need in our community that really underestimated how big of a need it was, but knew it was something that we couldn't identify anybody addressing it, certainly not addressing it successfully.
Did you start, was that your business? Was that your degree? I mean, your background?
Background's architecture.
Oh, so, but how did you go from, that's right, architecture. By the way, I love Gainesville. I'm a UCF Knight.
Oh.
But how did you make the transition? Were you always charitable? Did you grow up in a charitable home? Was philanthropy part of your, kind of your network and your blood work there?
I grew up in the Methodist Church downtown Orlando, and I remember going since I was very, very little, and all the way through high school and college, very active in the church. And so I think that's the root. You have a book that you're continually reading and people preaching to you about, look out for the marginalized, look out for the poor. The least of these are the ones you need to be focusing on. And when you look around your community and go, okay, well, who's that? One of them is the homeless, those suffering poverty, those that are looked down upon by other people. And I think that's what drew my attention.
And then what was the catalyst? I know you've got a couple of catalysts, but what are some? Hey Matt, hey guys, John Weil just said you do amazing things in our area.
Thanks.
So give us the catalyst or two that really kind of brought you to understanding how important having an ID is and how that all came to fruition.
It really never crossed my mind. I'd made a concerted effort to make sure that the homeless that would come to my church on Sunday felt welcome, especially felt welcome to come in and worship. They're often not dressed as well, and sometimes they don't smell as well, and they feel uncomfortable, and you just want to make sure that they feel this is their sanctuary just as much as it is mine. And so I make a concerted effort to sit with them and talk with them and welcome them. And when you do that, you hear needs. They'll say, Michael, do you know where I can get some food? Michael, do you know where I can get some socks? Michael, do you know where I can get health care or housing? And this just went on, every single Sunday for years. And so I got entrenched in the social service community to find out, where do you get socks? Where do you get health care? Where do you get housing? Where do you get food? And so I started creating these little maps, so I didn't have to draw new maps every Sunday and what time you show up.
Cool.
And yeah, it was really kind of used my background in architecture to create these little maps, and that worked for a while until I came across a gentleman that said, Michael, I got someone that will hire me. He just can't get me the job because I can't get my ID. And I was like, what? What do you mean you can't get your ID? I've never heard of anyone that can't get their ID. I've never had a problem getting any of my identification documents. I'm not calling you a liar, but I'd never heard of that problem. But you can't be the only person with this problem in our community, so there must be someone out in the community that solves this problem. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go out and find out who that person is, and I'll meet you back here that next Sunday. And I scoured the community. I reached out to every organization, because the last thing I wanted to do was to start another entity.
Right.
And I think any good member of our community, you look for who's doing good and you join them.
Right.
You don't replicate what they're doing, and now you have competing forces doing the same
Definitely.
thing. We could not locate anyone to do it. Went to the government agencies involved with identification, and it's hard enough to get your own identification. And you go in there and go, "Hey, I want to help this guy named Steve."
Right.
I don't even know if that's his real name, but he
Right.
seems like kind of nice guy. He's homeless down at my church. No, they look at you like you got another head growing out of your shoulder, and it's just not going to happen. It's not their responsibility at the end of the day. And so I was pretty disappointed. I was a little bit embarrassed that I couldn't find a resource, and went back that next Sunday to break the news. And it wasn't, hey, I'm gonna help you, because I had no idea, and the
Sure.
government told me I can't really help them. And I never saw that guy again. And that's the transient nature of homelessness. You know, they're dealing with some pretty significant life issues, and some mental health issues often, or physical health issues often. But the big turning point for me was a few weeks later, I came across another homeless man at my church, and he was the worst off individual I'd ever witnessed in our community. He was sitting down on the curb outside of my church, just looking at the ground. And I approached him to once again welcome him, and he couldn't even lift his head to look at me. He was just that broken. And I just remember I'll never forget how bad he smelled. I mean, I almost gagged as I approached him. And as I sat down beside him, I looked down and I noticed that he was missing one of his legs. And even worse off, his jeans were tied in a knot where his leg used to be, and it was oozing fluid. I'll never forget that. And I just was like, how can this person be a member of our community? You know, you're standing in front of this opulent church with all these dressed up people, and here's this person. And I asked him how I could help, and it almost seemed ironic because he was in such bad shape. What could he not do? But he couldn't respond for a while, and then eventually he just reached in his pocket and he pulled out a wad of paper and he put it in my hand. And I was like, why is this guy putting a wad of paper in my hand? And I opened it up, and it was a Social Security disability check for $880. And I was like, oh. And then he just said, I can't cash it because I can't get my ID. And that's where I got angry. Here is a guy, a fellow child of God, sitting in front of my sanctuary with a check worth more than my rent for a month, missing a leg, living in the bushes of downtown Orlando. That's obscene, but here's the real problem. Now I knew there was no one to help him.
Right.
It was easy to walk away from the first guy because there's someone that's going to help you. I don't know who it is. I'll help you find out. But I knew there was nobody to help this guy. And that's where, thankfully, by the grace of God, there was 20 members representing 5 downtown churches that happened to be starting to have a conversation about how to help the poor and disadvantaged people get identification. And I just joined that conversation. We spent 6 months trying to figure out how to do this, working with the government agencies, working with the social service agencies, working with attorneys. And we put up a pretty good viable model, and we've been doing it 10 years ever since.
Explain why it's difficult, because I think we talked about this earlier, and I think people can't believe that it's so hard. Although all of us remember you've stood in the tag line, the driver's license line, and you have your former ID and you have stuff
Right.
that you can give them to show. But explain why it is. I mean, explain how that works, because you've got somebody, let's say the gentleman who had the disability check. How do you even begin to get him an ID, or how would you begin to do it? What's the process?
Yeah, the crux of the issue is the space of identification. It's this odd little paradox that it has to be hard. It has to be hard to obtain your legal identification documents, whether it's your birth certificate, your social security card, your driver's license, or your ID. There has to be this real high threshold of proof, or else I get his identification documents, and then I get his money, and then I can claim his kids, I can claim his house, and I can also get away from my felony conviction because now I'm him. That's not good. Society can't run well if anyone can claim anyone's identification documents. So there has to be this barrier, significant barrier to get all these documents. And if you keep a high barrier, there's going to be a lot of people in our society that are not going to be able to get over that barrier. Doesn't mean we need to lower the barrier, because then we can get anyone's identification that wants to change their name or whatever.
Right.
And that's not good. And so that's the issue. There's a lot of people that can't get over that barrier. It might be mental health issues. It might be poverty issues. It might just be life issues that were no fault of your own. There was never anyone that ever filed for your birth certificate because you were born by a midwife out in some farm.
Right.
The health department might have caught fire, might have flooded. Documents get lost. across the board. And the same thing can happen with the SSA, same thing can happen with the DMV. We see errors on documents all the time that tangle your identification crisis situation. Birth certificates that say baby boy or baby girl because your parents never actually got around to naming you for the birth certificate. Or birth certificates that have a name that you've never used your entire life because your mama didn't really like your daddy. So your daddy's name's on the birth certificate, but your school records, your medical records, your social security card, all has your mom's name. Well, now you have a problem because these documents don't match up, so now you can't renew your driver's license or your ID until you get this little crisis resolved. And some of this is new. Some of this was enacted January 1st in 2010 here in the state of Florida. Since been adopted by a number of new states. It's called the Real ID Act. We were the first big state to adopt it in 2010. And in the Real ID Act, it's a reaction to the 9/11 terrorist attacks because the terrorists got driver's license and they went to the easiest state in the nation to get driver's license because that's just as good as a passport. You can go anywhere in the state and you can go to college to learn how to fly a plane if you got a driver's license. And so the federal government wisely said, well, we need to make all the states just as hard as each other so that you don't have the weakest link in a chain mentality. And so everyone needs to play on the same field, but we also need to raise the barrier to get driver's license, closer to what you need to get a passport. And so when a state adopts the Real ID Act, which almost every state has now, basically everyone's identity gets erased from the DMV, and everyone must start over proving who they are. The DMV is no longer allowed to use the picture that you've had since you were 16 in their database.
That's right.
They must start over. That's not a valid proof of who you are. And so to start over, and you only have to do this once in your life, you have to submit your birth certificate, you have to submit Social Security, and you have to submit two proofs of where you live. And all the names have to match. And even if there's a typo on one, which we see all the time, they cannot accept that type O document until we get it amended, either through the government or through a court of law. And so it's getting all that straightened out.
And so all the things that you're talking about are difficult if you have an address, have a mailing address, have a place where you keep the documents,
have a car, have a watch, have some money.
So what do you do? How do you start with them and go? All right, so we need to get you an ID or a Social Security card, or how do you do it when you're working with someone who all of their belongings are in the bag that they have with them, the shopping cart, or whatever they're carrying with them? And they don't have anything. Right. They don't have their original birth certificate. They aren't even sure how to get it. How do you maneuver through that? It must be so. No wonder it's so difficult.
Yeah.
But how difficult it must be if they didn't have an IDignity to do it for them or with them.
Yeah, I would say, and we've served 20,000 unique clients here in Orlando in the past 10 years, and thousands of more in the surrounding counties through affiliate IDignity organizations. I think it's important everyone realizes the primary mission of IDignity is to protect the integrity of identification documents. If we don't do that really well, then getting people identification documents is actually useless. It's actually negative. So our primary goal is to make sure that you are who you say you are. And we have developed processes and procedures to quantify that and to make sure and validate. There's obviously no lie detector test available that works. But we do have systems in place, and I'm not going to share that with the general public because that wouldn't be wise, to verify who you are. And then we create a case of support. And that can be anything, start with school records, start with medical records, start with military records, start with jail, prison records even help. But you can get down into baptismal records, census records. We even had to do some DNA work and some genealogy work. And you put up a case of this is who this person was from birth to now, and once you build that case, then you have evidence to qualify them for application to the birth certificate, which is still really, really hard. You still got to know what day you were born, what county you were born, what hospital you were born, your mom's maiden name, your sibling's name. That's a lot of information. So even that's not easy. And then again, those birth certificates might have errors that you don't know what those errors are, and you got to get those errors right, which is also hard. So it's a tricky process.
How long does, in general, how long does the process, when you've identified somebody who wants to be part of the services and really needs to get their ID, what is start to finish? I know it would probably depend, but people aren't, what I'm going to guess is that it's not this short-term, real quick turnaround time. I mean, this is a lot of work and effort that you have to put in.
It is. Some of them are easy. IDignity was designed and built specifically for the least of these. That's in our mission. We don't go after the low-hanging fruit. We go after the absolute hardest cases possible. That's what we're geared specifically for. Now, thankfully, that allows us to do the low-hanging fruit as well. But we never turn anyone away because the case is too hard. Those are actually the ones we set out for. And we've had some even international press coverage on a particular case that we solved or helped solve. But some people, we can get all their identification documents in one day. If you're born in the state of Florida, it makes it a whole lot easier. If you're born some other state, then all of a sudden it becomes a mail issue and often becomes a legal issue. If you're born abroad, born on a military base or something like that, I think it's important to understand when we talk about being born abroad that IDignity's mission also is strictly to help U.S. citizens, but also those that are nationalized citizens. I consider them to be even more citizens than me. They've denounced their home country. They took a test that I can't pass today.
I didn't take that test.
And also we help anyone that has a valid visa or a valid green card that has been stolen or lost or destroyed.
Well, that's what I also wanted to bring up. I mean, I want to continue to focus, and I promise you, Anne, if you're watching, I'm going to ask the question. But our mutual friend, and she's put it on Facebook a whole bunch of times and giving you guys kudos, Beth Hobart.
Yep.
She went through something where they robbed her home and took all of her identification.
Stole her safe.
Stole her safe out of the house, and you guys came to the rescue. You helped her. So it's not just a homeless person that they're working with. Think about it. If if everything's been stolen and you have to now go back and prove it, who's going to know how to do that?
Who's going to believe you are who you say you are?
Correct, especially in this day and age. And she gives you guys huge kudos all the time when she's talking about IDignity on how you all. Jim Hobart does too.
Okay, good.
You made. Yeah, I'm sorry. I meant to say Jim's an old friend too. How you all really made that difficult time for them much more palatable, and they could see the light at the end of the tunnel, and everything worked out the way it was supposed to work out. But otherwise, they would have had to try to figure it out on their own. Go to all the different government places. Jim's British.
Yep.
So you've got to deal with
a nationalized citizen.
Correct, a nationalized citizen, and so you have to deal with all of that.
Yep.
So I love it because obviously for me, the heart of it is helping the least of those.
Right. But that gives us the ability to also help people that are not marginalized.
Right.
And then you got people like Jim and Beth who now go out and promote the organization. They fund the organization. There is a earned income model that's kind of built in there that Jim and Beth can now help fund an indigent person that's suffering the same crisis that they did.
Right.
And IDignity's in a place that it's not easy for us, but we've done 20,000 of these cases.
20,000 is think of the
so we've
impact.
seen most everything, and we have the trust of all these government institutions, not just across the nation, but even across the world when you look at Homeland Security and the birth abroad things. And that trust allows us easier access to solving problems that a normal human being just doesn't have.
Right.
And so that allows us to handle these cases easier, but also do it a little bit more securely than the onesies.
All right, so let me make sure. What is IDignity's biggest need?
I want to say awareness. There's so many people that do not know that this is an issue. This is a sickness in our community. But there is so many people, not just in our community, but in the nation. I mean, the most credible research puts it at 11% of U.S. adult citizens do not currently have a valid government-issued ID, which is a crazy number. It's not my study. But we've shown evidence here. I mean, 20,000 in Orlando. That doesn't even include the surrounding counties that we've helped. It's awareness that this is an issue, and here is a viable organization that is solving the problem at a unique scale in our nation, to the best of my knowledge. And so the more awareness there is, the more people that we can help. Because the last thing we want to do is have some U.S. citizens suffering without identification, and hence not able to get a job, not able to get an education, not able to get into housing, not able to get proper health care, not able to recycle cans in their own community. We want to relieve that pain and suffering because we know we have the vehicle to do that. So awareness is big, but no matter how much awareness there is, we can't do our mission without funding.
Right.
It's expensive. This is a legal issue. On average, it's $250 per client, and we're serving 2,300 clients on average every year.
Wow.
It's a lot of money at the end of the day.
Sure.
But if you go, $250 can change this person's life, not just for a day, but possibly and likely, from what our data shows, the rest of their life.
Right.
They don't have another identification crisis once you solve their identification crisis, and now this person can get a job, if nothing else. And 70% of our clients,
they can find housing. They could. I mean,
Right.
The other thing, I had a bunch of questions before when I posted it that you were going to be on the show. People want to know what happens when you have a homeless client, I guess.
Yeah, client.
Homeless client. How do you handle the mailing address because a lot of times, on a driver's license, for example, you have to have a physical address.
Yeah.
How does that work? People were curious about that. I thought it was a good question.
It makes sense. I mean, when the Real ID Acts first happened, it was a nightmare. I mean, because the stipulations were just off the Richter, hard and difficult, and they backed off a little bit. And one of them was proof of address. When it first started, we would actually, if you did actually live in the woods or live behind a bush somewhere, we would have to find, through the property appraiser's website, what is the address of that parcel where that bush was. It was a nightmare, that wasn't the hardest, but that was it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Why does the government need to know which parcel? And thankfully the government realized that proof of address really isn't an identification issue.
Right.
That's what Social Security cards and birth certificates for. Proof of address is where can I find you if I need to find you. That's why it's on your card. And so the government wisely goes, well, I'm not sure I'm going to find you at the same bush. Let me find out who has the connection to you. Is it your grandmother? Is it your uncle? Is it your brother? Is it your case manager?
Right.
Even that can work. If you have direct contact with this individual all the time, that might be the best address. P.O. Box, the post office works. You can put that. That's not really good because everyone's mail goes to one place. And if it push comes to shove, I believe there's still, you can do a qualification of, I think it's transient homeless, I think is what they put. But you can
I didn't
imagine.
realize there was a qualification.
Yeah, I think if you really just don't have any connection, I think that's, and the laws change all the time.
And where do they, another question they had is where, so let's say you've worked super hard to get them an ID, they get a job.
Yeah.
How do they get their check? How do they get their, I guess what they were asking is how do we help so that the pattern, they don't have to digress, they don't have to regress?
I mean, checks, if you do have a PO, all post offices have a PO. And so you could use the downtown post office and receive your mail there as a U.S. citizen. To the best of my understanding, once again, not an attorney, but that's my understanding. We collect all the documents for clients. So all the documents are mailed to IDignity for secure distribution.
Wonderful. That's awesome.
We don't get their checks once they get working. I imagine by that time, once people get their identification, now they can get housing, even if it's a shelter.
Right.
They can get a secure place to go, which also has an address, so they can get a check.
See, that's a part we weren't sure of, and I didn't want to speak for you on that.
Feel free to speak.
Okay. Yeah. No, trust me, Ann and your social media guy do not want me speaking. So how can people get involved, or how can they join the IDignity mission?
A good way, once again, is advocacy. Go on our website. We got a very active Facebook group. Would love to have people more involved in that. The more people that know about it, the more people that are going to care about it, the more people that are going to support it. Come down and volunteer. It takes 120 volunteers on the third Thursday of each month to run these events, where all the government agencies show up, the attorneys show up, and about 200 to 250 clients show up.
Talk about the events then, because we haven't talked about that. Explain what an event is.
So the IDignity events, and we have separate ones in the surrounding counties, but the main one's here in Orlando every third Thursday of every month. We host them currently at the Salvation Army downtown in their gymnasium. And like I said, it's 120 volunteers for a full day, 7 to 3, I think it is. It's a wonderful experience. It's something everyone should do once in their life, and I promise you, if you don't want to come back, it won't hurt our feelings. We have a very dedicated group of volunteers, but everyone should do it once. It's an amazing controlled chaos, but it's also so inspiring to see the dread and hopelessness in someone's life instantly change, often that day, into one of opportunity, one of hope, one of dignity. That that some stranger has been able to pull this thorn out of your back that you're not allowed to touch, and the appreciation that comes with that, and the empowerment that comes with that. Because there's, that's the neat part about this space that IDignity plays in. It's all about empowerment.
Right.
All I'm doing is allowing these individuals to claim their rightful right as a U.S. citizen to legally be able to do all these things. That's all it does. That's it. There's nothing, it's the epitome of teaching someone how to fish. We call it the fishing license, even.
Do you really?
Yeah, because I can teach you how to fish, but you still can't fish without a license.
That's awesome.
And so it's an inspiring thing to do once, to sit across a table from a indigent neighbor who's often homeless. About half our clients are suffering from homelessness, and have a conversation. And you're going to hear their story because you have to. It's part of proving who you are. And to hear that and to participate in that, it's a good way to spend a day at least once in your life.
So we're going to share all of Michael's contact information, how you can reach out to IDignity. It's late in the day. How you can get involved. That's so important. Get involved. Support them. Think about all of the people that they're impacting, because let's say they're working at $2,300 a year. The exponential number that's touching because they're helping those people. I mean, it's an amazing thing that you guys do on a daily basis.
It's an honor.
And did you know in the beginning, when you first said, okay, this is what we want to do and get involved, that this was going to become basically your life's mission and what your mark that you're going to leave?
No, there is absolutely no way in the world I'd be sitting here today if I had any idea the scope of this. It's the mentality of, how do you boil a frog? And I think God knew that. I would have left instantly if I had thought this thing was going to change my trajectory of my career and my life. And it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And once you realize how massive the need is, and once you realize that this organization has the unique skill set to address this need, there's nothing better to do in a lot of ways. So,
any parting words of wisdom, anything you want to share with them before we head out today?
Even if this isn't your niche, and I completely understand, there's a lot of wonderful causes out there, even if it's something, the environment, the arts, whatever it is, do something. Do something. Dedicate your life to furthering that cause that resonates heavily with you. It would be an honor if that cause is IDignity, but whatever it is, just do something, get started, and then just see where that path goes.
Love it. All right, you and your team are such a blessing in
Oh,
our
yeah.
community. Please reach out to IDignity. We're going to give you all the contact information. You've been a joy to have on
Thank
the
you.
show. Thank you. We love you guys.
Thank you all.
Mwah.